They bound his wrists with frozen rope and threw him into a boat with no oars. The storm screamed across the black water like the voices of dying gods. Waves tall as mountains rose and fell, each one promising to swallow him whole. He was 12 years old. His name was Bjorn Karlsson, and the men who exiled him, the warriors who cut the rope and watched his boat vanish into the darkness, they did it because they were afraid of what he might become. They should have been more afraid of what he would become. This is the story of how a boy became a monster, how betrayal forged the most feared warrior the North had ever seen, and how an entire kingdom learned too late that some exiles should never be allowed to survive. The morning Bjorn was exiled, the sky was the color of old blood. Storm clouds gathered like wolves circling prey, and the wind carried the taste of iron and salt. The entire settlement of Ravensfjord had gathered at the shore, 300 souls standing in the freezing rain, watching as a child was sentenced to death. Bjorn stood before Jarl Magnus, the man who ruled Ravensfjord with an iron fist and a heart of stone. Magnus was a giant, his shoulders broad as a ship's beam, his beard thick and black, his eyes hard as flint. He wore a bearskin cloak that still stank of the kill, and around his neck hung Thor's hammer on a leather cord thick as a man's thumb. "You are cursed, boy," Magnus said, his voice carrying across the crowd like thunder. "Your mother died birthing you. Your father died defending you. Every warrior who trains you suffers injury. Every hunt you join ends in failure. The gods have marked you, Bjorn Karlsson. You bring death to everyone around you." Bjorn said nothing. His jaw was clenched so tight his teeth ached. His hands bound behind his back were already numb from the cold. But his eyes burned with something the Jarl didn't recognize, something dangerous. "The Verlva has spoken," Magnus continued, gesturing to the old woman who stood beside him, her face hidden beneath a hood of raven feathers. "She has seen your future in the bones and in the smoke. If you remain, Ravensfjord will burn. Our children will starve. Our warriors will fall. The gods demand your exile." But that wasn't the truth. The truth was simpler, darker, more human. Magnus's own son, Eric, had challenged Bjorn to a sparring match 3 days earlier. Eric was 15, already blooded in battle, already boasting of his kills. He was everything a Viking son should be: tall, strong, arrogant. When he faced Bjorn in the training ring, he expected an easy victory. Instead, Bjorn, smaller, younger, supposedly cursed, had disarmed him in 30 seconds, had swept his legs and put a wooden practice blade to his throat while the entire settlement watched, had humiliated the Jarl's son in front of warriors who would remember. Eric's face had turned purple with rage. He'd screamed that Bjorn had used sorcery, dark magic, the tricks of the cursed. And Magnus, seeing the shame in his son's eyes, seeing the whispers among his warriors, had made a choice. Better to exile the boy than admit his son was weaker. The Verlva's prophecy was convenient. The gods' will was convenient. Fear was easier to sell than the truth. "Into the boat," Magnus commanded. 2 warriors dragged Bjorn across the black sand. The boat they'd prepared was barely large enough for one man, a death sentence disguised as mercy. No oars, no sail, no food or water, just rough planks and fraying rope and the promise of drowning. As they threw him in, Bjorn finally spoke. "You will see me again, Jarl Magnus." His voice was quiet, but it cut through the wind like a blade. "And when you do, you will wish you'd had the courage to kill me properly." Magnus's face darkened. "The sea will kill you, boy. The gods will kill you. You are already dead." They cut the rope. The boat drifted into the waves. The storm swallowed it in seconds. The people of Ravensfjord went home, satisfied they'd done the right thing. The cursed boy was gone. Their crops would grow. Their hunts would succeed. The gods would smile upon them again. They were wrong about everything. 5 years passed like the turning of a brutal wheel. Bjorn didn't drown that night. He should have. Every law of nature, every prophecy of death, every certainty said the sea would claim him. But the sea is not predictable. The sea is not just. The sea simply is. His boat was thrown 40 miles north, driven by winds that seemed to have purpose. When he washed ashore, more dead than alive, his lips blue, his body broken, he found himself on a rocky beach in the Shetland Islands, far from any Viking settlement. An old warrior found him, a man named Ulfar the Scarred, who'd been exiled himself 20 years before, who'd survived by becoming something more than human. Ulfar had lost his left eye in a battle he refused to speak of, and the scar ran from his forehead to his jaw like a ravine carved by lightning. "You have the look of death on you, boy," Ulfar said, standing over Bjorn's broken body. "But you're still breathing. That means the gods aren't finished with you yet." Ulfar didn't train him. He remade him. For 5 years, Bjorn learned what it meant to survive. Not the comfortable survival of a settlement with walls and fires and stored food, but the raw, primal survival of the wolf, the bear, the raven. He learned to hunt in waist-deep snow, to kill with his bare hands, to move through darkness like a shadow, to read the language of wind and water and blood. Ulfar taught him the old ways, the berserker ways, the techniques that most warriors considered too dangerous, too savage, too close to madness. How to ignore pain, how to fight past exhaustion, how to let rage fill the empty spaces where fear should live. "A warrior fights with his body," Ulfar would say, circling Bjorn in the training yard they'd carved from frozen earth. "A berserker fights with his soul. You must learn to become the storm, boy, not fight it, become it asterisk." Bjorn's body changed. The skinny 12-year-old became a young man carved from stone and hunger. His arms grew thick with muscle earned through endless combat. His chest expanded from running miles through blizzards. His hands became weapons, calloused, scarred, capable of crushing bone. But it was his eyes that changed most. They became the eyes of something that had died and been reborn, something that had looked into the abyss and laughed, something that knew betrayal so deeply it had become part of his blood. On the night of his 17th birthday, Ulfar gave him a sword. It was ancient, older than memory, forged by hands that knew secrets the world had forgotten. The blade was dark as midnight, the edge sharp enough to split falling snow. Runes ran along the fuller, words in the old tongue that promised vengeance. "This was my father's sword," Ulfar said, "and his father's before him. It has drunk the blood of kings and cowards alike. It has no name because it needs none. Men will name it by what it does to them." Bjorn held the weapon, feeling its weight, its balance, its hunger. "What now?" he asked. Ulfar's one eye studied him. "Now you make a choice. You can stay here, live quietly, let the past die, or you can become what they feared you would become. You can go home." Bjorn's jaw set. "Home exiled me." "Yes, and that exile made you strong, made you deadly, made you into exactly what they were afraid of." Ulfar stepped closer. "So the question is, do you prove them right, or do you prove them wrong?" Bjorn smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I'll prove them both." He returned to Ravensfjord on a night when the northern lights danced green and purple across the sky, when the dead were said to walk, when the boundary between worlds grew thin. The settlement had grown in 5 years. More buildings, more warriors, more wealth stolen from raids across the sea. Jarl Magnus had become powerful, feared, respected. His son Eric was now a decorated warrior, having killed his first 3 men in a raid on the English coast. They'd forgotten about Bjorn Karlsson, the cursed boy, the exile, the one the sea had swallowed. That was their first mistake. Bjorn walked through the gates at midnight alone, his sword across his back, his face hidden beneath a hood of wolf fur. The guards, young men who'd been children when he was exiled, challenged him. "State your business, stranger." He didn't answer with words. He moved like lightning, like death, like something that had learned to kill in the darkness and the cold. His fist caught the first guard in the throat, crushing his windpipe before he could scream. The second guard reached for his axe, but Bjorn was already there, his blade sliding between ribs with surgical precision. Both men fell without making a sound. Bjorn dragged their bodies into the shadows and continued toward the great hall. Inside, Magnus was holding a feast. 50 warriors filled the long tables, drinking mead from horns, telling stories of battles and conquests, laughing at jokes only men who'd killed together could understand. Eric sat at his father's right hand, already drunk, already boasting about a woman he'd taken in the last raid. The doors exploded inward. Bjorn stepped through like a shadow given form. The hall fell silent. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward the stranger in the wolf fur hood, the man who stood alone against an army, the warrior who radiated violence like heat from a forge. "Who dares?" Magnus began, rising from his chair. Bjorn pulled back his hood. The Jarl's face went white. "Hello, Magnus," Bjorn said, his voice quiet, deadly calm. "I promised I'd return." The hall exploded into chaos. Warriors grabbed weapons. Women screamed. Eric lurched to his feet, his hand on his sword, his face twisted with shock and rage. "You're dead," Magnus roared. "We sent you into the storm, the gods took you." Bjorn smiled. The gods tried, the sea tried, death itself tried. He drew his sword, and the sound of steel leaving the scabbard was like a wolf's howl. "But I'm harder to kill than you thought." "Seize him," Magnus commanded. 20 warriors charged. What happened next would be spoken of in whispers for generations. How Bjorn moved like water, like wind, like something not entirely human. How his blade sang through the air, parting flesh and bone with equal ease. How he fought not with rage but with cold, calculated precision, each strike efficient, brutal, perfect. The first warrior lost his sword arm. The second took a blade through the heart. The third had his leg swept and his skull crushed beneath Bjorn's boot. 4, 5, 6. They fell like wheat before the scythe, and Bjorn didn't even seem to be breathing hard. "Stop," Magnus's voice cut through the carnage. "Stop." The remaining warriors froze. Bjorn stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by corpses, his sword dripping red onto the rushes. Not a mark on him. "What do you want?" Magnus demanded. His confidence was gone, his authority was crumbling. He looked old suddenly, mortal, afraid. Bjorn pointed his sword at Eric. Him, in single combat, winner lives, loser dies, the way it should have been 5 years ago. Eric's face went pale. "I'm not fighting you, you're cursed, you use sorcery." "No sorcery, no magic, just skill." Bjorn's eyes were ice. "Or are you still the same coward who needs his father to fight his battles?" That got him. Eric's face flushed red. His pride, the pride of a warrior raised to believe himself invincible, wouldn't let him back down, not in front of his father, not in front of every warrior in Ravensfjord. "Fine," Eric snarled, drawing his sword. "I'll kill you properly this time." They cleared the center of the hall. 2 warriors facing each other across blood-soaked ground. The son of the Jarl, trained by the finest teachers, decorated in battle, confident in his strength. And the exile, forged in ice and hunger and the darkest edges of survival. It wasn't even close. Eric attacked with raw power, the way he'd been taught, strong, aggressive, overwhelming. Bjorn simply flowed around him. He parried with minimal effort, letting Eric's strength work against him, waiting for the opening that always came when pride overruled skill. It came after 30 seconds. Eric overextended on a powerful downward strike. Bjorn sidestepped, his blade flashing up, catching Eric's sword and sending it flying across the hall. Before Eric could react, Bjorn's boot crashed into his chest, sending him sprawling onto his back. Bjorn's sword came to rest against Eric's throat. The hall was silent as a tomb. "You were always weaker," Bjorn said quietly. "That's why your father exiled me. Not because I was cursed, because I made you look weak." Eric's eyes were wide with terror. Please. Did I beg? Bjorn's voice was ice. When they tied my hands and threw me into the storm, did I beg? Magnus stepped forward. Bjorn, please, he's my son. Bjorn looked up at the Jarl, at the man who'd destroyed his life, who'd stolen 5 years, who'd sent a child to die rather than admit his own son's weakness. And here came the twist that no one expected. Bjorn lowered his sword. Eric gasped, scrambling backward. The hall erupted in confused murmurs. Magnus stared, uncomprehending. I'm not here for revenge, Bjorn said, his voice carrying across the hall. I'm here to show you what you created. You sent a boy into the storm because you were afraid. And you were right to be afraid, but not because I was cursed. Because I was *capable*, because I was stronger than your son and you couldn't bear it. He turned, addressing the entire hall. You all watched. You all let it happen. You believed the lie because it was easier than the truth. You sacrificed a child to protect your pride. He sheathed his sword. I came back to show you that the exile you feared was the best thing that ever happened to me. You thought you were sending me to death. Instead, you sent me to become exactly what I was meant to be. A warrior, a survivor, someone who doesn't need your approval or your settlement or your gods. Magnus's face was purple with rage and shame. Then why come back? Why kill my warriors? Why threaten my son? Bjorn smiled. To give you all a gift, the gift of fear, the gift of knowing that the choices you make have consequences, that the children you betray grow up, that the storms you send people into sometimes send back monsters. He walked toward the door, every warrior in the hall giving him space. At the threshold, he turned back one final time. I'm leaving now. I'm going to live my life, fight my battles, make my own path. His eyes found Magnus. But if you ever exile another child because it's convenient, if you ever sacrifice innocence to protect pride, if you ever let fear make you into cowards again. His hand rested on his sword. I'll hear about it, and I'll come back, and next time I won't be merciful. He vanished into the night. The ending they didn't see coming, *. Bjorn walked north, away from Ravensfjord, away from the settlement that had tried to kill him. But he wasn't alone. 7 warriors, young men who'd watched what happened in the hall, who'd seen true strength for the first time, followed him into the darkness. Where are we going? One of them asked. Bjorn looked up at the northern lights dancing across the sky. To build something new, a place where strength is honored, not feared, where the cursed and the exiled can become something greater, where the storms we survive make us stronger, not bitter. In the years that followed, Bjorn Karlsson became legend, not as a raider, not as a conqueror, but as the founder of a warrior brotherhood that accepted the rejected, trained the outcast, and turned exile into purpose. They called themselves the Stormborn, and they became the finest warriors in the north. And Magnus, he lived for 15 more years, but the fear never left him. Every storm he wondered if Bjorn would return. Every knock on his door made him jump. He died an old man, respected but haunted, powerful but afraid. His final words were, I should have let the boy stay. They wanted to destroy him. Instead, they forged him. They sent him into the storm. He became it. They thought exile was an ending. It was a beginning. This is the truth they don't tell you about survival. The hardest battles don't break you. They reveal what you're truly made of. The betrayals that should destroy you become the forge that makes you unbreakable. The storms that should kill you become the proving ground for the warrior you were always meant to become. Bjorn Karlsson was exiled as a boy. He returned as a legend, not because he wanted revenge, but because he wanted to prove that what they feared in him was never a curse. It was his destiny. The greatest warriors aren't born in halls of honor. They're forged in the frozen water, in the hunger, in the betrayal, in the moment when the world turns its back and you have to decide, will I die here, or will I become something they'll never forget? Choose to become the storm. The North remembers, and so will you.